I'm making this video because I'm getting tired of typing regarding certain incidences recently where police have, in one case, inappropriately assaulted somebody. They arrested somebody who was disabled, and according to the video, it looks like there was no reason for them to have thrown this guy to the ground. He was being completely compliant. And then there's another case, the one in Texas, where there was a pool party and a bunch of police officers arrived and detained a number of youth. And one in particular, the video I watched, was one young girl was asked to leave, and she seemed to leave when I looked at all the different video. And then she seemed to return, and she was being told to leave. And eventually, at the point in time, I guess the officer decided he was going to detain her. The video I watched, it's not clear what exactly happened, but I guess maybe for reasons as simple as obstructing police, whatever, he decided to detain her. And when he decided to do that, she resisted, and then it looked rather sensational, his taking her to the ground and attempting to control her, and people are looking at it going, oh, some young girl in a bikini, and why is he treating her that way? So what I'm left with is there's a number of things the public don't seem to be aware of. There is a process. Pretty much any police service has an arrest protocol. They do all arrest the same way. At the point in time they decide they're going to arrest somebody, detain somebody, there's a certain way they go about doing it. And the public generally doesn't know that, so they view, the arrest of a teenager should be different than the arrest of a 250-pound, martial arts master or whatever, right? The police don't know who they're dealing with in most cases when they're making an arrest. And they follow a process because following the process from a legal perspective keeps them safe from prosecution. If any police officer was allowed to arrest anybody any way they saw fit, then things like chokeholds might be in use some places and not other places. So there's certain things they are allowed to do and they're told to do as per procedure. So when they testify, they say, as per our procedure for arrest, I performed the following, da-da-da-da-da. There's certain things they're allowed to do and not allowed to do. And they're trained to do the right things and the things they're supposed to do so that instinctively they will do those things and not something else. So that's why most arrests will look identical. They do the same things all the time. Now you might say, well, when it's a kid. No, you see, if you deviate from the practice, it's hard to deviate from the practice if you're trained properly. Anyway, one of the things I talked about was in a Facebook discussion was the public doesn't seem to be aware of the legal powers of arrest granted to police officers. Now, if you think about it, if it's a situation where someone you want to see apprehended, you want the police to be able to arrest them. Let's say there's someone breaking into houses in your neighborhood and you've had things stolen, your neighbors have had things stolen, and then you see somebody sneaking around someone's backyard, you call the police get there. If the police don't have the power to detain, that guy can say, no, it wasn't me, and walk away, and you'd be really upset. Probable cause. You've provided information to the police, which gives the police probable cause to do a number of things. Once they have probable cause, they can do things like detain somebody. So that fellow that's walking down the street when the police arrive matches the description you gave when you called in. They have probable cause to detain him. So if he decides to leave and maybe he's got a car parked down the street full of all the stuff he stole, would you be happy if the police said, well, he wants to leave, I guess we have to let him leave? No, you wouldn't be happy. So power of detention means they are allowed to physically restrain, and they are allowed to apply as much force as necessary to effect the arrest. The more the guy fights back, the more force they're allowed to use. And it's always a +1. If you punch a police officer, he's going to do more than just punch you back. That's kind of the rules of the game. Why? Because the police are constantly in danger, and if they don't overwhelmingly subdue you, they remain in danger. You can injure them, and they're not interested in being injured. So the public doesn't seem to be aware that we've granted police certain powers, and yes, I'll agree there are some police who abuse those powers, but for the justice system that you want to function when you're the victim, the way you want it to function, these powers have been granted to the police. In certain situations, you might not think they're appropriate, but that's the difficulty of the system. You have granted the police certain powers, and yes, it's possible for police to abuse the powers, but they've been granted the powers to perform their job. Now, when it comes to being arrested, if you're detained by the police and I made a post saying that there's a number of situations, honest cop versus corrupt cop versus criminal versus law-abiding citizen. Depending on what's going on, the police may be detaining you incorrectly because you aren't the correct suspect. But if they have probable cause, they can detain you. And if you decide to resist, you're probably going to find it very uncomfortable in a physical sense. So in the case of the pool party, I watched the video and saw a bunch of people running around who, in some cases, complied when told to get on the ground, and other places did not comply when they were told to leave, and then later did not comply when they were told to get on the ground because they refused to leave the scene when commanded to do so. So it gets messy, but the system inherently has weaknesses where it gets messy. And if we were to remove the ability for the police to detain, then a whole lot of things would happen. Like, you pull over, I wouldn't have to stop. I was speeding, but the police aren't allowed to detain me, so I don't have to stop, right? Like, as soon as you remove the police officer's power to detain, the whole system falls apart, because anybody in a situation where they were about to be arrested could just decline to be arrested. And then, the whole thing falls apart. Hopefully that's obvious. So yes, certain situations will occur where people look at it and go, wow, that looked really horrible, but it's the standard practice. If you resist an arrest, force is permitted to be applied to you. Now, you could be arrested and later released because you aren't the person they're looking for, but at the time, if they think you are, then you better comply with the arrest, or it's going to get messy, physically speaking. Anyway, I think education of the public in this area would go a long way to help people better understand what to do in a situation. There are situations where a police officer can and cannot command you to be detained, but as soon as they tell you they've got reason to detain you and you resist, life is going to get really unpleasant really quick. So you might have an argument later after the fact, but you should probably comply and then pursue a complaint after the fact if you think you were, incorrectly detained. And in many cases, most likely, there isn't going to be a defense. Like, if the officer detained you because you matched a description, that's it. It's done. If he can, as long as he can kind of prove that he had a description given to him by somebody that matched yours, then you're sunk. He detained you with probable cause. He later determined you weren't the guy he wanted, but that's the way our system works. Otherwise, people couldn't be arrested at all. Hopefully that makes sense. That's all. Bye.